right. Welcome to the Ultra High Net Worth Clients Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Broadhead. Today's incredible business owner guest is Connor Emma. Connor, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Sure.
My name is Connor Emma. I've been an engineer for almost 10 years and a business owner for the last 4 or 5, just about. I've worked primarily in startups in tech, and I recently left Coinbase last year uh, to pursue my own tech startup. And while I was actually working at Coinbase, I also started a crypto investment fund that I was both managing and working there at the same time. So that was pretty interesting. We actually pitched to Coinbase Ventures while I was still an employee. So that was a pretty funny turn of events.
Nice. So was Coinbase your first job out of college? You're a young
No,
man.
yes, I'm
You're,
29 now.
okay.
I got my first internship in the most backwards way possible when I was 18 or 19. Um, I worked a lot of service jobs when I was very young. I'm probably 15 years old. And I was working at a grocery store actually at the time when I was 18. And they taped an IT internship note to the punch clock, which I thought, I was like, oh, okay, IT, that's, just setting up devices, setting up networks, et cetera. It should be easy enough, right? And then I get there and they're like, oh yeah, no, we're doing programming in Java full stack end to end. Never looked at a line of code in my life at that point. So it was really like a do or die moment. But I worked there for a couple of years. I bounced over to IBM for 2 years, finished school, and then started applying to jobs in Silicon Valley, the Bay Area. I I actually taught myself app development while I was working at IBM. It was like moonlighting, learning React, and eventually got picked up by a Series B startup out in SF. They're called Game Time. Funny enough, they're actually a sponsor of Kill Tony now, which I think is pretty cool. Um, but yeah, I worked there for a couple of years. It was my first like proper, tech job, as it were, and worked there for 2 years. And then COVID hit. I had a friend of mine who we were working on a side project together at that time too, based around options trading. And one of them actually submitted that project to an accelerator without telling me. So I got a text like the following week saying like, oh, your project got into this accelerator. You have to pitch it in a few days. Can you do that? I was like, yeah, of course. So we got accepted, went through a demo day. And I was probably about 25 at the time. And that venture ended up kind of going south, folding. We had a, dispute between the founders. So I had just bet it all and lost. So, it was a transitional period. I was like, oh, do I still even want to do tech? Took a few months off, just to really think about it. And then that's when Coinbase reached out to me. They're like, hey, we really want you to take another look at this. And I was laying on my friend's couch and I was like, oh yeah, I should probably go that direction. And, just hit the ground running after I started there. It was like drinking through a fire hose. I was surrounded by a lot of really, really smart, really accomplished people. And I just couldn't get enough of it fast enough. I was learning about things I'd never heard of, particularly with regard to DeFi around summer 2021. I spent all my time watching YouTube videos or like reading the Slack channels at work, just trying to understand how people thought and how they discovered this new information and kind of how to internalize it. And there was I had some instinctual response that was like, this is going to be huge. Um, this is an entirely novel take on the tech industry. Like I need to absorb all of this. Um,
You're talking crypto or Coinbase
Both.
or blockchain? Yeah.
Yeah. So primarily crypto. It's a very deep rabbit hole, but there's a lot of crossover with traditional finance as well.
hmm What year was this that you started with Coinbase?
2021, early 2021, right before they went public.
Nice, nice. So so crypto wasn't on your radar in a big way, but before that,
And it was briefly, like it came and went.
yeah.
I had a friend whose older brother had a very tall rack of Bitcoin mining devices in his basement.
hmm
And I remember being down there, and it was like your picturesque, uh, esoteric tinkerer basement, right? Like he had this cube shaped desktop, which I thought was hilarious, and all these miners hooked up to it, and there were like a bunch of calc formulas taped to the wall and everything, and 3D printers like kind of sticking out of places. And he had one of the first VR headsets ever. It was like the first iteration Oculus. And all these, it's just like a mess of all this very, very emerging tech
hmm
strewn about everywhere, all over the room. So I was like, I really want to know about this. Like, your brother's mining Bitcoin, Litecoin, and Dogecoin. Like, I should probably go read about that.
hmm
So that was kind of the first brush with it.
hmm So you had that brief love affair with crypto, and then it kind of faded, and then you worked for Coinbase, and it came back with a vengeance. What was it about crypto with Coinbase that just connected with you or made such an impact on you?
Think it was the realization that this huge barrier to entry with traditional finance, money management, and careers, I feel like that are initially required a lot of prestige or a lot of doors to open simultaneously. Um, that barrier to entry did not exist within crypto. It was really an industry where it's so new, and still not fully understood. I feel like broadly that you could really get out of it what you put into it. Um, Not even from specifically a monetary perspective, but just, you can build things, you can invest, you can make products that people actually want to use. There's just a lot of opportunity to, I don't know, change the face of how personal finance looks for a lot of people. Um, and I'm even starting to see more like whatever you want to call it, Gen Z and younger kind of experimenting in bits and pieces with crypto, but it's kind of nice. It's like it's a good complement to an existing system that gives ordinary people, at the very least, more options or another avenue to think about that doesn't require, you know, years and years of practical experience or uh, not as, I guess, rigid.
Mhm. Awesome, awesome. So, you're at Coinbase. You're just learning everything you can. At what point do you decide to go off on your own, and what initiative felt impactful enough to be worthy of, leaving these gold handcuffs behind?
It was about halfway through. We started as a organization, I guess. We kind of started digging into this concept of a DAO. or a decentralized autonomous organization, they call it. It's really just a fancy term for a large pool of capital that the contributors have some say in how it's spent or managed. Um, that's really the most basic version of it. Um, we started a DAO. A group of employees started a DAO outside of work just to learn and experiment and better understand what they actually are and how they function. It was meant to be more of a learning experience than anything, but I really did not want to miss out on this. So I started contributing a lot of my time to helping organize it. Eventually became one of the capital managers of the DAO. We were setting some ground rules, contribution amount, distribution rules, how folks wanted to cast their votes, how they wanted their voices to be heard, how many people were required for a consensus when we were going to make a decision. And the whole purpose of the DAO was to sort of pool capital together and actually buy NFTs during the boom. And so we kind of had this fun thesis that we were going to form this DAO, run it for 1 year, and then wind it down and distribute everything at the end of it. And this very informal group was kind of how I got my, again, kind of a backwards start into asset management at large. The goal was not even to do asset management. I just kind of blinked and then found myself managing around $1 million in assets, specifically for NFTs. And it's like it didn't really hit me until it was almost done. And we decided, before we actually wound it up, that we were going to do a properly buttoned up version of it. We were going to go raise a fund, do the same thing, same thesis, but we would structure it a little bit more traditionally and do things a little bit quicker.
Nice. Um, that's awesome. And that's your main focus these days?
So I co-manage that with the other founders these days, and then it was about a year later. So I'm still managing Right Click Save Ventures, which is the digital asset fund. About a year later, I decided to leave Coinbase to build a consumer tech startup. Pretty much just a version of Venmo, but it works in every country. I actually didn't know until that August of last year that Venmo only worked in the US.
Nice. Yeah, did the idea for Try Boop, did that come from, traveling and then Venmo wasn't working? You're like, what gives?
I think that was part of it. And the other part of it was, having worked at like one of the largest consumer crypto businesses out there. I was seeing a lot of other things being built that, in my opinion, were not necessarily just at Coinbase. There was, like prior employees, they left to start companies or whatever, but there were a lot of things that were being built in crypto that I thought weren't. I felt like they're kind of missing the point. If your goal is to onboard many consumers, I think you have to remove a lot of the overcomplicated elements to it, which sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised how little that's done. So I think there's a huge amount of value there, like particularly in terms of just stable coins, and then the whole instant settlement thing is just so competitive with existing banking rails. But I think packaging that up and bundling that into a nice, easy to understand platform has still, it remains to be seen. But I was I was pretty gung ho on that, because I was like, if I don't build this, someone's going to, and I am not going to be able to sleep at night if that happens. So that was kind of the last straw.
Yeah. So, on one of our other podcasts, we had a guy on who he basically had to get something notarized, and it was super annoying and time consuming and frustrating. And the notary like just blatantly screwed something up, so we had to do the entire process, pay for everything. And he was like, "F this," and he's like, "I'm not gonna stop until we can just do this online." But obviously there was a ton of regulatory issues he had to overcome. And, it was like his day at the notary, for a decade that he had to endure to, allow common folk like myself to get things notarized online. What sort of challenges are you coming up against, and how does one make a Venmo without borders? Which it sounds like what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it best. The regulations are definitely non-zero when you're talking about sending money internationally. Um, there's a few big considerations. Probably the biggest ones are anti-money laundering, OFAC sanctioned countries. Um, the know your customer requirements. Like these are the pretty big, basic building blocks of most financial apps. I want to say, if you're building within the U.S., then the you still have to do most of those, but the sanctioned countries doesn't really come into play as much. Um, there are there are requirements. The requirements for converting cash into crypto in the US are different depending on what direction you're going. If you're converting cash to crypto, the requirements are different than converting crypto to cash, which I find to be pretty funny. Mostly in terms of like risk rating for whatever partner bank you're using, but there are a ton of moving parts to this. In every banking partner that you choose in your respective region is going to have its own compliance requirements, some more than others. So far, the US has been the most strict, as you can probably imagine. But I mean, fingers crossed, we got the soft thumbs up from our banking partner currently. So we're in the latter half of the compliance requirements right now. So I think in a couple of weeks, we're going to be able to originate payments from the US to all of the EU, the UK, and Brazil in about 2 to 3 weeks.
Oh, wow. That's exciting. And
But
and,
you're right.
yeah. And the target customer for this is basically anyone that uses Venmo? Like, well, I guess what their Venmo equivalent in other countries as well?
It depends on the region. Yeah, a lot of Europe uses Revolut, which is
Yeah.
a pretty popular one. Wise Transfer is popular from pretty sure US and Canada, and US to India is like the most common use case I've heard for Wise. Zoom, XOOM, that one is they got bought by PayPal. A friend of mine uses them to pay merchants in Africa. So they have a pretty wide reach there. But the solutions are a bit fractured based on where you're looking. And almost everything that I've seen is either not free like Venmo is, or the settlement time is uh, unpalatably long, I would
Mhm,
say.
mhm, mm. That's that's awesome. So what's the grand plan? Like, you got 2 or 3 weeks until you're able to actually, start sending some money across borders? What's next?
It's been largely grassroots up until this point,
Yeah.
just tapping everybody we know on the shoulder, texting my whole network, emailing everybody. Um, but I think it's really finding that, I guess, I don't want to say target demo, but making sure it's more of a sanity check, I would say. can we actually deliver something that is legitimately useful to people that need to remit payments across border, right? Like maybe you have a family whose kids are attending school abroad, exchange student program. Maybe you have a family who lives in one country and then they have a family member working in another, and then they're sending remittances home. That's a super common working arrangement in Singapore and in Mexico to the US. So I think it's more about like start small, make sure we have all the important pieces there, right? Like make sure we're managing funds properly, the conversions are happening correctly, people can withdraw to their bank accounts when they want to, things aren't getting stuck, make sure that all the bugs and kinks are worked out. And then really just find the existing pain points, find the slow, expensive rails and try to offer an alternative.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. So I know for me, uh, I have team members all over the world, US, Philippines, Pakistan, um, Eastern Europe, Africa, uh, like pretty much you name it. So I use Wise, Payoneer, Western Union, PayPal, Venmo, Zelle, Bism. It's every payday is so annoying. No, I mean, and not just because I, have to pay a bunch of money, but it's like, oh God, like how do I pay this person? So to like have, just one thing, do you just call it boop?
Boop.
Boop. Yeah, to just be able to boop people, that sounds like a major time saver from my perspective.
Well, looks like we have at least one customer in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, yeah. That would be super easy. So what like tell me the difference. How does Boop differ between, Wise, Payoneer, Western Union, PayPal, like all these guys?
Yeah. I mean, to my knowledge, I haven't used Payoneer before, but to my knowledge, there's at least a marginal fee associated with every transfer for most of the international sending apps. They only work during banking hours, or at least Wise does. Which, when it comes to banking off ramp, you can't really get around that. Um, for Boop, we're actually talking about issuing like a debit card so people can spend right away when they receive money. So they would actually be able to spend, they would be able to swipe, and then uh, they would effectively be using their digital asset balance um, at the point of sale. But we're built a little bit differently, mostly because we don't, for the transfer process, we don't rely on traditional banking rails. We don't do Swifts. We're not doing wires. Um, any of the existing struts in place to transfer dollars from a bank in one nation to another, we're not using. We're actually just using stable coins as the bridge to cross borders. And then folks are kind of at liberty to off ramp to their local bank. And so instead of having like a one size fits all solution, what you have is, somebody signs up for Boop in their respective country, they link their respective bank account, and then funds can enter or exit Boop just like you would with Venmo, just using a simple debit pull process. So we convert that cash to crypto, we send the crypto stablecoin across to the recipient, and then they can convert it back into their own localized cash whenever they want.
Okay, wow. That's a pretty ingenious setup. Is there anyone else out there, with this idea?
Definitely. Yeah, there's a handful of teams trying to do the same thing. It's a pretty daunting uh technical challenge, I would say, technical regulatory resource. It's tough to get it right. Because you're trying to also abstract away the crypto aspect of it, which I think has been the limiting factor for a product like this taking off in the first place. I think the second people see stablecoin or crypto wallet or crypto anything, it sort of becomes uh, too maybe, or I guess I would say it becomes higher friction than what they have already. Um, like with the good thing about Wise and PayPal and Venmo are that, you think pretty simply in terms of, you have dollars and they go from A to B. You don't really need to know how Swift works or ACH debit works or, um, you know, any of the existing rails behind the scenes. All I need to know is that the cash made it where it was supposed to go. And I feel like this is a huge problem that crypto still has, is we're trying to force educate people on wallets and networks and stable coins and DeFi. But I think most people really just want to send their funds and be done with it. So I think abstracting all that stuff away is long overdue. And I'm still pretty surprised no one's done it yet. It's harder than it sounds, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah. Do you see Boop as a bridge between using dollars to purchase everyday items and using a stable coin or some sort of crypto to purchase everyday items?
It's definitely possible. Once you get onto crypto rails, you're pretty much at liberty to go where you want in terms of what assets you hold or what assets you buy goods and services with. We're starting to see a handful of POS systems think about accepting crypto. I don't know if you've seen, I know Stripe is launching their crypto products. Visa is kind of experimenting with stablecoins as well. They haven't really released anything formal to my knowledge, but I think they're just, the last communication I heard was they're researching it internally, but they want to be public about that. I think if you do have a really simplified way for folks to get on to crypto that they don't have to think about, then it certainly stands that they can start checking out at a POS with stable coins without actually realizing it. But there are a bunch of other advantages, I think, to being on these rails. Like there are a lot of DeFi and yield products that, kind of to touch on what we talked about earlier. There are ways for individuals to kind of have their own version of like a high yield savings, that just weren't available prior. So yeah, I mean, there's like, whether you're buying something or you're standing up your own version of a savings account and getting a better rate than you would at a traditional institution, I think if you have a way that is just as easy or easier than what you're doing today, then I think most people would say, why not?
Mhm. Just out of curiosity, like what does the world look like if the majority of transactions are not dollar based or local currency based, but crypto based? How does that impact the world?
That is a great question. I think with stables, it's interesting because they're most of the big stable coins are backed 1-to-1 with dollars. And then, I mean, the majority of the assets held in something like USDC would be in US treasuries, but those stables are always redeemable for $1. So there will be $1 somewhere, right? But you're transacting still this like abstract concept of it on this digital network. So I think if the whole world starts converting to stables, then I think we should probably be pretty confident that, uh, you know, these existing networks um, are going to continue to be as reliable as what we have today. Crypto is advantaged in the way that it has instant settlement available to it. Things like privacy, those are advantages, but it's still, I think, nascent in terms of reliability and uptime for a lot of networks. We just haven't seen a, millions and millions of people using crypto transactions on a daily basis yet. So I think we're trying to figure out what a scaled solution to that looks like. But I do think it unlocks a lot of markets that are still stuck using cash today. Like the first example that comes to mind is merchants in the Middle East. Like, they still won't use credit card networks because it eats into most of their margins.
Mhm. So it sounds like, I mean, from my perspective, it seems like the governments of the world are just doing everything they can to limit crypto and to stop its progress in any way they can. So it seems like that's probably because governments of the world would lose a lot of power, but our global economy, it seems like, would just be given a heavy steroid and would massively grow. So it's, old story, power to the people.
Yeah, it's like it sounds obvious when you say it, right? Like when you lower the barrier for more people to participate in the economy, right? You usually end up with more more products and services, more availability, lower prices. It's I feel like the cornerstone stimulating economic growth, right? Um, I think with governments and their pretty strong take on crypto, uh, I think it's probably dependent on what country you're talking about, but most likely a derivative of the same problem. I'm definitely not going to pretend to know what the U.S. government's interests are at large, right? Like, what our incumbent politicians have in terms of motivation for maintaining the status quo, financially speaking. Um, I still think, you know, there's some, sure, maybe there's some national security consideration around the very tight control of the minting of new dollars, but I do think just letting go, so to speak, is probably going to yield positive results rather than whatever disaster scenario they might be accounting for.
Yeah, amen. Well, we are coming towards the end of our time together. You're freaking super interesting, man. Wish I could ask you about 100 more questions. As you're probably aware, a large part of our audience is financial advisors. They love to, you know, get more insights into business owners such as yourself. I mean, you're 29 years old. You're already doing like amazing stuff. Um, to the extent that you're comfortable sharing, do you currently have a financial advisor? And if not, would you ever, consider one?
I don't, and yes, absolutely. Um, I would kind of, selfishly speaking, I would like to work with somebody that is as geeked out on crypto as I am. Um, Mostly, but also understands the traditional finance landscape as well.
Mhm.
Because I think they're both strong in different ways. You know, um, there are just different types of opportunity available for asset management within the crypto ecosystem. So I think we're all gonna probably start to see more, not less, clientele requesting some exposure to crypto.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, and there exists these income generation, yield opportunities up and down the risk spectrum as well. So you do get these really uh, neat opportunities to kind of build something novel, like build a like a heavily modernized portfolio, which I think is kind of cool.
Mm.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Cool, cool, awesome. And my final question, open-ended question, if you've seen or heard any of these episodes, you know what that question is. It's you can take it in any direction you like. What are you working towards?
I have a really cheesy answer, to be honest with you. Um, I think I've always been motivated by the idea of freedom. Um, and as I'm approaching my 30s, I'm like still kind of realizing that you have to like define exactly what that means for yourself. You it's probably pretty necessary to say exactly what the goalpost is if you are ever going to be aware that you've reached it. Um, and so I've kind of, spent the last 10 years like kind of running straight towards whatever I thought was going to be like that, my ticket home, so to speak. Like I said, I worked service jobs from 15 to 19. And then, been grinding through like big tech and small startups for, you know, 8 years after that. And then finally took the plunge, to do my own thing. But I think my end game is really to, to offer at large, whether it's tech, whether it's like the arts, um, offer at large whatever I'm good at, to the world in like the most effective way that I possibly can. Um, and to have an opportunity to like change the shape, of the face that people look at when they see the world. Um, so I know it's probably as cheesy as it gets, but
No, man,
you
it's
know,
great.
that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, it's sincere and genuine, and you're living, breathing, and walking that truth every day, man. So I'm excited to continue watching your journey. Where can my audience find out more about you and try Boop or just Boop?
Probably should probably be more social, but LinkedIn, I guess. I think it's in slash Connor Emma. And then my Twitter is where all things crypto happen. It's 0x lacrosse is my Twitter, or the Boop Twitter is just try Boop. I think that's all my socials. But yeah, I'm definitely on the internet. You could also just email me, lacrosse@tryboop.com.
Yeah, awesome, man. We'll be sure to link all those URLs in the show notes. Connor, thanks so much for taking the time, man. This was awesome. You're doing some
Likewise,
really cool stuff. Yeah.
really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. To all the listeners out there, thanks so much for tuning in and keep on growing out there, everybody. See ya.